Welcome, this is the third Nintendo that I'm going to be recapping. If you missed the first two videos, the first video was my first recap of a Nintendo. So that video was following my process, me figuring out how to recap a Nintendo. The second video was purely focused on the soldering, not as like a tutorial or showing off how I solder, but just like sort of a solder ASMR style video. And then this one is going to be a walkthrough of my process that I use when I recap a Nintendo. That being said, I am not a professional. It will have kind of guide vibes, but this is the disclaimer: recap at your own risk. This walkthrough of my process assumes that you already have some basic soldering experience. And with that all out of the way, let's get into the process. First, I want to go through the supplies that I use when I recap a Nintendo. A lot of this stuff is going to be pretty obvious, and some of it, if you are familiar with soldering, or which you should already be familiar with soldering, you're going to have a lot of this stuff already. The first thing you need, obviously, is a Nintendo. And of course, you're going to need, to get into the Nintendo, you're going to need a Phillips head, number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. You want something that's going to be that's going to have a little bit longer reach, because getting into these holes and getting these screws out, you're going to need a little bit of length. And next thing you'll need, of course, is capacitors. I prefer to get the kits, these capacitor kits. These ones are from Console 5, which is a great resource, not just for capacitors, but also for just information in general about the Nintendo and other retro consoles and retro computer stuff. A couple other companies make capacitor kits as well. Just search for like a Nintendo capacitor kit. Now, you don't have to use a kit. If you know the values, the main board is always going to have the same 3 capacitors on it. The differences will be in the power board in the back. I like these ones because it doesn't matter which version of the power board you have, it always comes with every capacitor you could possibly need. You'll have extras when you use one of these, but you know, I don't mind having extra components lying around personally. Next up, you'll need a soldering iron. I don't recommend you use a cheap one. Get something, if you already have one, hopefully you already have one of these. But if it is a cheap one, then you're probably going to struggle getting the power board off of the main board. And along the lines of the soldering iron, of course, you'll need solder in order to put the new capacitors on. I always recommend flux. I love using flux. Flux is your friend. I use a ton of flux. I probably use too much flux. A solder wick is how I get the old solder off to get the power board off. I also use a solder pump. This is a cheap solder pump that I got with my soldering iron. I think it came with it. And it works. It does the job. It's not the best, but I think it does a pretty good job. I always use tweezers, just because that's how I hold the solder wick. And just for other things like prying the capacitors off. Of course, you'll need side cutters to cut the legs off of the capacitors once you've applied the new ones. For prying, you'll need something that you can use to pry off the lids on the power board. I use a Lego brick separator because I just keep it around on my workbench, and it comes in handy for a lot of different things. You'd be surprised. This is what I use to pry off the lids of the power box, but you can use whatever pry tool you want. And then, you'll need something for cleaning afterward, of course. If you're working with electronics, then you're going to want 99% isopropyl alcohol, or at least 91%. And then, of course, stuff to clean up. Like I have cotton buds and brushes that I use to clean up the board, clean up the flux, and just clean up the board in general. I always use a fume extractor. I won't have it on when I'm showing you the soldering, but I always use the fume extractor. And the last thing that I recommended, it's not exactly necessary, but having a multimeter is helpful. I do a bit of testing at the end just to make sure that they have good connections when I put the board back on. If you saw the first video, then you'll see why I like to do that. And I think that's everything as far as the tools that you'll need. I probably missed something, but yeah, let's get into the teardown. I'll take you through very quick overview of tearing this down. Oh, I also forgot to mention gloves. I always wear gloves. I always recommend wearing gloves, not just for soldering work or working on electronics, but just in general in life. I never take these gloves off. I always wear these gloves. Okay, to start the tear down, the only thing you need to open up the Nintendo and get the board out is, like I said, the Phillips head #2 screwdriver. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to flip it over here, and there are 6 screws along the back, the bottom of the shell, in these holes. You don't need to take these screws off. These are just for this clip here, or this plate here, I believe. I should also mention this screwdriver has a magnetic tip, which makes it easier, more convenient to get these screws out of these holes here. If you don't have a magnetic tip, you can just carefully, once you've unscrewed them all, just carefully flip it back over and dump them out. I'd recommend, if you're going to do that, put like a towel down or something so they don't roll all over the place. But once you have all your screws out, then all you need to do is just lift the top off. We'll put this off to the side here. Those are all the case screws, so I'm going to move that off to the side and then get a new container. We're going to put 7 shielding screws. We're going to take those out and put them in this container here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see if we can see that there. 5, 6, and 7 here. Okay, so the screws are removed. Take the shielding off. Set it aside. And now we only have, let's move these guys aside. Fresh container. Now we have 6 screws along the cartridge slot, and then there's 2 screws on the power box here, one back here, and then one under here, right there. All the screws are the same, except for these 2 screws, not the top screws, but these lower screws. Zoom in here. These 2 silver screws are a little bit longer, and they have to go back in this spot here. So just remember that. And with those screws out, we can lift everything up here, and then I just lift it up a little bit so I can just pull the cartridge slot out. This just slides out from underneath here, and there's a little tab on here. It's hard to see, but this tab, you have to make sure that goes underneath the board whenever you're putting it back on. Before we can do anything else, we have to disconnect. This is the player 1 controller port. Just carefully rock this connector out, and then player 2 is over here. Again, carefully just rock this out as well. And then this connector, the same thing. This one might be a little bit harder to get out. I usually just use my thumb or some pliers or something just to kind of slide each side out a little bit, going back and forth until it comes out. And then once those are out, then we can remove the bottom shielding here. We're just left with our board now. This is the cartridge connector, the pin connector, and this can actually just come off as well. If this is your first time disassembling your Nintendo, you could probably use this opportunity to scrub the pin connector out, but this just slides off of there. I'd also recommend cleaning up these pins on both sides here, just to make sure you get a good connection to the pin connector, and then you can kind of get a brush in here and clean these guys off too. For us, we're just going to put all this aside. We have our board. Move these off to the side as well. We have our board here. We're going to take it over to the mat and start our recap. Okay, and here we have the board on the mat here. We can take a look at it. Let's zoom in a little bit. We can see it is NES CPU 11. It's different from the other 2 boards. The other 2 boards I had were 07s, I believe. It's still copyright 1987. I don't know if that ever changes. And we have our same capacitors here. We have a 2.2 microfarad 50 volt, a 6.3 volt 100 microfarad, and then a 50 volt 1 microfarad, which is the same on every board. The differences will be in the this power box here, the power board. Okay, so I like to start with taking the box off, and the way that I take the box off is first I prise off the lid here. This just pops off. Now, if you watch the first video, I attempted to desolder from these points, and it wasn't working out for me, so I ended up having to desolder from these points, and that ended up causing just some minor issues when it came to reassembly. However, I think it could have been a lot worse going this route. So the second video, I did manage to desolder from these points, and it went a lot better. And I recommend you go from this side. I'll show you what can happen, how it can go wrong going from this side. But that being said, the way that I do it is I desolder these 4 points here, the anchor points here, and then I just desolder up here. Okay, now I did say this wasn't going to be a soldering tutorial, but I will go through my method for removing solder and removing the components. I like to use this big fat knife edge blade tip thingy here. It's pretty big, gets a lot of heat onto the board, I think. I feel like it does, I don't know. And what I like to do is flux her up here, get her nice and fluxy. And then we're gonna add a bunch of new solder to it here. I don't have my fume extractor on, so you guys don't have to deal with that noise. Let's add a bunch of solder here. Get this all melted. Try to get it hot without getting it too hot. Oh no. This one's the hardest one for me. I'm fudging this up. Ugh. Alright, hold on a second. Yeah, I picked this one because it is the most. I struggle with this one the most when I'm doing this. The other ones are all pretty easy, pretty straightforward. But this guy, just, I don't know. He doesn't like to do it. It takes a lot of heat. I'm just gonna add a little bit more flux again. And then once I've added some solder, which I barely add, I didn't add it like hardly any onto it, I will use my solder sucker pump, suck up as much as I can. Got a pretty good suck there. What's left on there, then I'll use my solder braid. And honestly, I find that just overloading this thing with flux, especially on these parts, just really helps. Really helps pull the solder off. Trying to pull off as much as we can. It's looking real good actually coming off. It's all that flux I added really helped. Looks pretty bad close up, but it doesn't look that bad zoomed out. With these ones, I always struggle with these pins too, to try to, like, with knowing whether it's disconnect, like whether it's come loose or not. It still looks old. It looks like it's just hanging on just the tiniest bit here on the side. Sometimes I just add a little flux and hit it with some heat, and it'll kind of like dissipate away, or like spreads out away from it. That might be good. So typically I'll do one leg at a time and then try to get as much solder off of it as I can, and then, you know, move on to the next one. And then once I kind of go back around, as I'm sort of like pulling off a little bit, you can kind of like shake this. You could just sort of move it around a little bit, and you can start to see which ones are loose and which ones might still be connected. And with these ones, it's the same process basically. Why did I grab that? I will flux them. If you watch the last video, this is where I started with this flux. This basically, you can see it's pretty good. It's a pretty good, I think, solder shot of getting these desoldered. So I still will hit these up with, let's zoom in a little bit more here, sorry. So still add more solder to these. Get a bunch of fresh solder on there. These are much easier because they're not soaking up as much of the heat as those other points were. Just be careful of some of these components down here. There we go. I'm not going to do all these, but I'll just show you this top one. I might put a little bit more solder on this guy. Okay, and then same thing, we get our pump out. And hopefully we have a very satisfying, actually I'm going to wipe some of this off here. And suck her off. Yeah, that wasn't too bad. And I'll show you the next one. These are actually not too bad to go through, and it's kind of satisfying if you're into this kind of thing. This isn't the best solder sucker. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but it gets the job done. I might turn these guys a little bit. I like to hit this one from the side. And suck. So most of the solder is removed, but I still want to wick it. I'm gonna need to wick it. I don't know if pumping even does anything. I just like to add a bunch of fresh solder to help it flow a little bit better, and then wick it off afterward. Alright, so we fluxed it. Gonna hit it up. With the wick, and yeah, you can see that guy looks pretty clear. So yeah, I'll just go through and do that for all of these until they look like they are all cleared off. Alright, so now that I've got the solder mostly removed, pretty much all removed, as you can see here, I will then start to kind of gently pull. You can see, like, as I'm pulling up, I just pull it lightly, but you can see that those guys clearly, they're loose, right? And then I'll check, like on this side, try to gently pull these guys up. They're not really coming off. I don't want to put too much pressure on because I don't want to rip anything. But if they're not coming off, then what I'll do is try to, I'll heat it up a little bit and kind of pull on it. It's kind of tricky to do, but just sort of heat it up. No, Mux, no! Hold on, my cat's attacking me. Okay, sorry about that. Where were we? So, trying to show this, well, it might be easier like this. Right, so when I get some flux on here. Flux is your friend. So yeah, while I'll kind of push. Who's that? There's a cat here again. I'm trying to pull this up a little bit so you can see it's like it's loose there. Oh, there we go. And then she came off. Nice and easy. Wasn't even putting that much pressure on. And that's the hardest part of the whole process here. Zoom out a little bit. Just getting this guy off.
But it's not that hard. If you just take your time and you're patient and you don't apply a lot of force, like I said, going this way, I recommend Console 5 recommended it, and after doing it a few times, I think that's the way to go, personally. You can see it's left this guy on here, and the reason why you kind of don't want to go on this side is because these pins here, they're soldered in on this side, but the solder flows through over to here, and if you're trying to so if you desolder here, you gotta try to suck all this solder up, all the solder that's on this side up too. And if you don't get it all up and you're pulling, you're pulling the box up, trying to slide these out here, you can rip these pads on the bottom here pretty easily. And then then you have to go and run traces from whichever ones you've ripped off to wherever they go here, and that's kind of a nightmare. So it's much easier, I think, to go from this top part here. So now that I've got the box off, I'll put the board to the side, and I usually come back to that. Obviously, I always come back to that after I do this. And again, the same thing here. We take our Lego brick separator and pop off the top here. We can see inside here, and I think there's a way you could, allegedly, there's a way you could replace these capacitors without taking the box off, but I have no idea how you would do that. I'm going to clean all the flux off of this because I love to use so much flux. It ends up getting everywhere. It makes for a lot of stuff to clean. But yeah, this one, it is in fact is it the same one? What does it say? No, this one's different. It is different. I think it's different. Looks like it's got 4 capacitors still, just like the other 2 that I have, but this is an MTM 8V, Mitsumi MTM 8V, which is different than the other ones. I always pull up Console 5 because they show every board possible and where all the capacitors are and what their values are. So I'm gonna pull that up and then use that as a reference when I'm picking out the capacitors and then putting them back in. Okay, so here we have, I think that's where the capacitors are on this one, but this is the list this is the one that I have right here. And that's the list of the capacitors. They're marked with these numbers on the board, and then you can use this to get the values of them. But yeah, I'm gonna got my kit, so then I just pull them out of the kit, take them out one at a time, which I'll go through how I take them out. Very simple. It's going to be the same for every single capacitor here and on the other board, but I'll show you here and on the other board real quick. Alright, usually sometimes when I'm working with removing components, I go through and I'll mark them with like a marker, just where the components are. Just so because I'm kind of dumb sometimes, just so I don't mess up and try to pull out the wrong component. I'll then go through and pull out each component one at a time. I'll demonstrate one of them here. So usually I start with the big guy. This one might be the hardest one to take out. Like I said, I use this big guy because it makes it easier to pull the little components out, but this one can be a little tricky because I can't really get both of them at the same time. So usually I just sort of rock it back and forth. I'm pulling on it with my hands as I heat up the ends. And then I just continue doing that for all the rest of them. The other ones are easier because I can just heat it up over. Although the other ones are they're easier because I can heat them up. Because I can heat them up simultaneously with this, but at the same time, it's a little trickier to get into here to pull out the pull on the component while I'm heating them up. So sometimes I'll use my tweezers and get them kind of like wedged in underneath there, so that I can see if I can do this on camera, because this one is kind of tricky. Let's see. Do not flux those. Yeah, see, he just flew right out as soon as I got him hot enough. He just flung right out. So yeah, I'm going to go through, take the other two components out, and then I'll actually clean the inside and the board and the outside of the board, even the stuff that's not my flux. And I'll go through and clean up these holes with solder wick. Okay, so we got the board cleaned up, all the rest of the components that I wanted out. Both sides are clean here, and you can see the holes are clear and ready for the new components. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through each one. I always do the big guy last. I usually start with like this one, and then do these two, and then do the big guy last, because obviously it's easier to get the other ones in if the big one's not in there. So I'll show you how I do one of them, and then it's all the same process after that. Okay, so we're going to start with C. It's marked C5 in here. It was this 10, I believe it's a 10 microfarad 16 volt on the board. I'm going to replace it with this 10 microfarad 35 volt. And to do that, make sure the polarity matches. We've got a long leg, I'll show you here, the long leg for the positive and a short leg for the negative. There's also a stripe on these capacitors to indicate the negative. On the board here, we have, you can see it better on this big one, the stripe, the white stripe matches the white stripe here. So just make sure that your polarities are lined up when you put them in. Very easy, simple. How they sit on the ground or close to it, and then I sometimes will just bend them off to the sides like this to hold them in place while I solder, or just hold them, just keep the legs, sometimes I'll keep the legs straight and just hold it with my finger while I just tack it in. I really should probably, when I'm putting new components in, probably use a different tip than this one. But I'm too lazy to do that. And there you go, just like that. She's ready to go. And then I just do that, obviously do that for the rest of the components. Oh, and obviously cut the legs off when you're done. Okay, with them all in and it all cleaned up, then we can move on to the main board. And this one, I don't even know if I'm going to go through the process of this because it's easier than the other one. You just, the same thing, the same concepts apply. You just, I will mark off where they are, and I think it's just these guys here. Mark off where they are, pull them out, clean it up, and put the new ones back in. Okay, one thing I want to note real quick is on this board and the last board I've been struggling. This is where the two capacitors are next to each other on the main board here. I've been struggling to, where is it, to get these holes cleared. Like, I got some of them, I think, maybe the whole way through, but like, I cannot get these completely cleared. I'll show you what I do to get the new capacitors in there anyway. But yeah, I've tried everything. I've tried putting fresh solder in there. I tried tons of flux. I tried wicking and sucking, and everything. I just can't get them cleared like I need to. I'm afraid to put too much heat on the board because I don't want to damage these vias. You can already see that I'm like kind of messing up here. So you just be careful around these two. I don't know if that's just a common thing with all these, but I've struggled in the last two boards to get those cleared. But yeah, I'll show you what I do. Okay, so what I do when this happens is we're just going to do this one. This is the 100 microfarad. I'm going to flux it up first here a little bit. So what I do is kind of tricky. I have to hold this up at an angle like so. Where did that capacitor just go? There it is. Positive in here. You can see it's not going to go in. This is very tricky because I got to kind of do this. Just slide it. I heat it up. Hopefully it'll slide through. I don't have, if I had some helping hands, that would be better. Can you see this? I'm trying to keep it centered. So kind of balance it here, and usually this will work. All right, let's put a little more. Let's put a little solder on it. Solder the pad. So I got something to heat up too. Alright, so solder's on there. Here we go. Heat her up. And then try to slide her in. What is going on here? Wow. This one's being a real butt today. I think I'm straight on there. Okay. Let's try like this. Okay, there we go. So yeah, just get some solder on there, slide it in. Unfortunately now, I have to heat it back up so I can turn to line the other leg up. And then that's why I hold it on the side like this, so I can push it through. If it's not heating up, we could add more flux and a bit of solder. I'm just going to put it on my tip of my iron. Actually, I need to clean the tip of my iron. Put a little more on here. Okay. And heat it up again. There we go, we're sliding through. Make sure the other pin gets in there. And there we go. It's a bit finicky, but it works. There we go. Try not to put too much heat on it. I don't know. I don't think it's good for the capacitor that way. Okay, and then on this side, you can kind of keep doing it, keep pushing it through. Trying to. It should be good though. That should. And I'm just going to do the same thing for the other one. Okay, and with these two guys in place, along with this third guy, we are done. Now, before I go through, I'm all cleaned up on here. Before I go through and put the other board back on, I just like to go go do one final visual inspection over what I just did, just to make sure that, check the polarities of all your capacitors. Check to make sure you don't have any bridges on your soldering. Down here, those look good. Where'd the other one go? Wow, I did such a good job soldering that I can't tell the difference. Oh, there it is. Yep, we look good there. Polarities correct on those guys. Excellent, excellent. Check this board here. Check for any potential shorts that's supposed to be there. Everything looks good there. All the joints look okay. Those all look good. Polarity's good there. Oh, actually, let's see if we can see this one. This capacitor here, I got the polarity wrong on. So I'm going to have to pop that out, flip it around, and put it back in, which hopefully shouldn't be too bad. Let's do that. Okay, now we are correct. Excellent. And with that, we're ready to start putting it back together. So let's get put the top on this guy first. Just the top. Like so. And then we'll grab our board here. I cleaned everything off on this section too while I was working on the board. We'll stick these guys in here. Make sure you slide this in. Hello. There we go. Sliding it in. All the pins are in here. The top, and then we're pressed in here. When I do this, I will typically sort of hold it like this. I get some flux. It should be good. Should be good this way. But yeah, I'm just going to solder all these into place and then solder that other bit. Very simple. Get some flux. Show you it real quick. We'll just do these two. Zoom in. I like to keep it pushed down just to make sure that it's all nice and snug. Get some more solder on here. Alright, I'll hold them in place, and then I usually come back on this side, solder up these guys real quick. Again, I should probably be using a different tip, but I'm not gonna. That's good, and then I come back over here, spin it around this way. Get these guys. I will then go back. Usually I go back and make sure to clean up all this stuff, like these guys. I go over these guys a couple of times just to try to make them look a little bit nicer. But yeah, that's basically it for the soldering. Now, before I put it all back together and fire it up to test it, I just like to do one more test with my multimeter. This is from, if you saw the first video, you know that I didn't solder on the other side, or desolder these pins from the other side, but that there was an issue with that if you watched the first video. And I just like to test to make sure these pins are connected to the board. So this guy should be here. This guy should be here. And it's not. It's not? Oh no, it is. Also test to the other part of the board. This guy goes to here. That's good. This guy goes to here, which is here. This one will go to here and here. Excellent. And this guy should go here and here. Excellent. So I think we're good. Those are all the tests that I know how to do. Just real basic, quick checks, I guess. So now we can just put it all back together, starting with this guy, and then we'll get it all back into the case. Just basically in the reverse order that we took it apart. Okay, we're all hooked up and put back together. I think the Muppet is going to test for us. He said he wants to use Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game to test. So, yes, Muppet. Okay, we're going to test through RF first, so I need to turn the VCR on this time. You ready, buddy? And, alright, we have, yeah, pew pew pew, we gotta push start. Here it is, yeah. Bing. Oh, it looks like garbage though, I just realized. That might just be, the cartridge might need a little clean. I've not tested this cartridge as per usual. Yeah, that looks better. Look at him, he loves watching TV. This cat loves TV. Yeah, that looks much better. So good. And functionality seems to work. This one looks like crap. Alright. Pause here. Do you want to play, bud? We'll check. Look at him watching the TV. Let's switch over to the other one. Bam, bam. Watch out, buddy. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. All right. And still working. Excellent. I'm going to try reseating this a few times. And that last, the very end, like a secret ending to the last video, was that last Nintendo that I worked on. Like, this one's got a little bite to it. I'm used to, you know, they grabbing onto your cartridge a little bit. This one's got that. That last one did not have any bite at all. We're good. You gonna play, bud? Come on. Mops, it's all over. We're all done with that. Alright, so this was the third Nintendo recapped and good to go. And I promise after this we're going to be done with Nintendos for a little while. Well, at least the consoles. I have other stuff I want to work on. I might break out the other Nintendo controllers because they were not working and really dirty. This one kind of needs a little bit of a clean too. It's not bad, but so I might do a cleaning video and a fixing of the other Nintendo controllers, but I won't be doing any more consoles for a little while. I have one more that I do want to look at, but I'm gonna put take a little break from Nintendos for a little bit. So yeah, hope you liked it. Let me know what you thought, and we'll see you in the next one.